Once again, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody. Can we hear a loud good morning? Good morning. Thank you very much, and thank you for being in time. We're sorry we got a little delayed, maybe because of the power discussions, but we will try and make up for it during the day. We've got a power-packed day, ladies and gentlemen, so we are starting off immediately with a fireside chat. May I invite Srikanth RP, editor, Express Computer, to please join us on stage. Please get your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, as Srikanth joins us on stage. And for the chat, we would like to welcome on stage Mr. Nitin Chugh, Deputy Managing Director and Head Digital State Bank of India. Please get your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Chugh joins us on stage. Thank you.
So very good morning. थोड़ा एनर्जी ब्रेकफास्ट तो सब लोगों ने कर लिया है. Good morning. That's more like it. So I have the pleasure of having Mr. Nitin Chugh. I mean, he's a familiar name in the industry. Most of you know him, but in case you don't know, comes with a lot of experience. See, we normally do a lot of tech-based talks. All this. We thought it would be nice to delve into the personal side and take some life lessons from him. So for the moment, this is like an enterprise version of Coffee with Karan. Okay, so without the techie stuff, no architectures, no technology talks. Mostly we'll keep it away from that. While because it's part of his career, obviously, ek do words to aa jayenge. So Nitin, a warm welcome to you again.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I think I've been called in to just entertain all of you.
Okay, so I'll start with Nitin. If I can, have some aspects from you on your earlier part of your life, because every part of our life, right from our childhood, the way we are brought up in life, to the way it shapes our careers and the individual what we are, every part of our life has life lessons. So Nitin, if I can hear from you on your early part of life, your upbringing, you're from Dhanbad, which all of you know has been, core activity for mining. So can you delve into some lessons, Nitin?
Yeah. No, it's actually nice that people know where Dhanbad is and what Dhanbad is. In those days, it used to be a struggle to explain where is Dhanbad. But anyhow, I think the early years, Dhanbad is a coal mining area, and it's got a whole lot of research outfits, setups, both central government and otherwise, and of course the coal mines. So I grew up in Dhanbad in one of the labs that CSIR has called Central Mining Research Institute, and my father used to work there as a scientist. So yeah, the early years were like shielded from the larger world. Not that too much was happening, but yeah, whenever we would come to Delhi, even looking at DTC buses used to be very fascinating. And the fact that those days there were no mosquitoes in Delhi used to be very fascinating. Now there are. But yeah, we were used to power cuts, we were used to all kinds of other things. But I think the initial years growing up in a town like that, with very little to do in terms of social life, people used to socialize within themselves. And there used to be only work and play. Basically studying and playing, nothing more than that. And once in a year, annual holiday to a trip to Delhi or maybe an LTC tour. So I think it was apparent that life wasn't easy, but I think we were still in a comfort bubble because of growing up in a colony. And having all kinds of brainy people around you, most of them were research people. The discussions were always very intellectual, and most people would aspire to either be engineers or doctors or civil servants. And our school used to also turn out a lot of illustrious people. Not that I was any one of them, but so I think the focus was clearly on academics and whatever time you had to just socialize and play. So good formative years. I think I'm very happy that I had this chance to grow up in a place like Dhanbad and not in a megapolis. It would have been very different otherwise.
Fantastic. So as we move on from your career to, if I can have some insights from you on your career, your first job maybe, how did you start your first job, and maybe some brief aspects of how do you move in the career. We'll also touch upon after that, from different functions, how do you know. So if I can understand you, your first job, and then we can take it.
So I went to do my engineering in REC Kurukshetra. Now it's called NIT Kurukshetra, and I got selected on campus by HCL, and that was my first job. It was a sales job, completely unprepared for something like that, but that were all the jobs that were available those days. Either you could get into sales or you could get into hardcore engineering. There was no software those days. It started to come maybe 3-4 years later, but essentially it was either hardware or core engineering. So some of us did find our way into sales jobs. In fact, I sat for another company, the first one, which was Pertec Computers. I don't know how many of you even remember. There used to be this company called PCL, and I got rejected in that interviewing process. HCL was the second one, got through, and joined them immediately after campus. And as usual with all the new people, I was given the old Delhi area where hardly any business used to happen. So didn't even have a conveyance of my own those days. So I used to travel by buses and used to live in Gurgaon and go to Delhi, and then we used to have our office in Tilak Marg, very close to the Supreme Court. So it used to be a lot of travel up and down, leaving early mornings, coming back late night, just going and meeting all kinds of customers. And most of the community there is the business and the trading community. So they are not natural people to buy the things that we were selling. But I happened to sell, those days we used to have a 386 machine called HP Vectra, and it was very expensive even those days. So that was my first order, but that gave the confidence that yeah, anybody can use a computer. And I think there was this narrative also that yeah, computers are meant for everybody. So did that for about 2 years or so, all sales. Eventually, I moved out of that central Delhi area also into South Delhi. Okhla was upcoming those days, so did a lot of sales in Okhla. And then I joined Modi Xerox, which was the market leader in photocopiers those days. And people would ask that what is an engineer doing in a sales role? But yeah, I mean, it was probably easier to explain that at least you're selling a machine, you're not selling something else. So it was good. Sales kind of rounds you off in many ways. You interact with so many people. It opens you up as your own personality. It helps you deal with pressure at a very young age. It also tells you the right and the wrong, because yes, sales is very, very susceptible to what we call mis-selling these days. And those days there was not much of push sales. It was a very methodical, process-led sales, and that is how people like us were trained back in those days. And so I continued in sales in HCL and then in Modi Xerox before I moved into banking.
I think as the biggest lesson from sales you've said, and all of us have that little bit of sales in each one of us. I mean, it's an art of persuasion. We do it in different types and different roles. But having said that, I think you moved across different functions, from service to running contact centers to outbound call centers, liability side. How did all these, what challenged you to take different roles at different parts of your life? And what impact did it have in your career?
See, I continued with sales even with my first role in banking, which was Standard Chartered, because I came from a sales background, so I was hired for sales. And then when I moved from Standard Chartered to HDFC Bank in 2001, when it was still a new bank and a much smaller bank, I was again hired for sales because HDFC was setting up the sales function those days, and retail was just opening up for the bank. It was predominantly a wholesale and a transaction banking company those days. I did that for about a regional role for about 2.5 years, a little less than 2.5 years perhaps. And then I moved to head card sales, and we wanted to grow the cards business those days. And Amit used to be in that team those days. And we put out the first 5 million in those first 5 years.
But it's an interesting aspect of what he did in his card sales. So if you want to tell it in your own words, the passport part and...
No, that was in Xerox. That was
Xerox,
not in
okay.
card.
Yeah, if you can say that.
So Xerox sales used to be very glamorous because, that was a big thing in Xerox. I mean, it was predominantly a sales company and then a service company to basically maintain the machines. And yes, there was a factory also we used to have in Rampur where some models were manufactured, but by that time we had started importing many of these machines. So when I joined Xerox, it was middle of the year that they used to follow, October to September those days. And I was asked by my boss that passport banwa lo apna. I said, I know that there is some contest going on. It was very prestigious. It was called Honors Club those days. I said, where will I compete? I'm joining middle of the year. And they didn't used to have a pro rata system. There was no pro rata target setting. So I had to carry the full year target. I said, ये तो होगा नहीं, कोई फायदा नहीं है. No, नहीं बनवा के रख लो ना. You never know. And on the last day of the month, 30th September, the last closing day, I somehow managed to scrape through and managed to do a little more than that. So there was some accelerator also that if you do that part, on the way back from Australia, which was the trip that was to be made that year, you will also get 2 nights in Singapore. So I qualified for both, but I didn't have a passport. And the trip had to go in 15 days from then. So then the next 7 days, I was only trying to get my passport. And thankfully, just the last day that I was supposed to deposit my passport, and those are Kshitij Jain, who heads Exide Life Insurance. He's been there for the longest time. He used to be there, and he used to run that function which required all this, sales planning, incentives, etc. So I remember he called me and he told me कि यार मतलब ऐसे थोड़ा होता है कि तुम लास्ट डे पे आके पासपोर्ट दे रहे हो, क्या कर सकते हैं, अभी मिला ही अभी है तो आई एम कमिंग स्ट्रेट फ्रॉम द आरपी ओनली. So managed. So in fact, I sat on an aircraft also for the first time when we went to Australia. So कोई भी पूछता है तो the first flight I took was Qantas.
Fantastic. I think he deserves a clap for this. I think we have been trying to see glimpses of IPL in this last over slow hitting overs. So probably this is one example of a last ball 6 in his life. Yeah. So you're saying about your career, about HDFC. You joined HDFC.
Yeah. So then I moved to credit cards, and cards, while it was there for about 2 years or a little more than that, we seemed to be lagging because we were the last entrant in cards those days. I think the only bank that launched cards after us was ABN AMRO. So the first meeting I remember I had with Mr. Puri, we were told that we need 1 million cards this year, and by then we had some 250,000 cards, or maybe lesser than that, in about 2.5 years. So it didn't look like possible, but yeah, it was a task. So we put everything in it. We really, and Pralaya used to be the business head, who's now the interim MD of CSP, and he mobilized everybody, and it was really a good team effort on the cards business side, and we managed to put out 1 million in less than 12 months, and then we had a grand celebration, and even today many people have that little plaque on their tables which says fastest million in the industry, which it was that time. So I mean, the first million is always the most precious, the most cherished. After that, of course, now the bank is about 16 million and all of that, but although people who were associated, many of them are continuing even now. And whenever all of us meet up, I think most of the conversations go back to the first million kiya tha, to bahut maza aaya tha.
So I think I missed one part, or I think you got lost in conversation about every stage of your life. You've kind of taken on different roles. You're not stuck to your comfort zone. Maybe you challenge yourself. How did this have an impact for you as from a career point of view, as an individual also? This question I'm asking because all of us are in our own comfort zones, and sometimes we may need to be challenged. So what is the learning? What are the lessons? What are the learnings?
See, comfort zones are very comforting. So it's very hard to make that choice, and people calibrate their own aspirations also that I've arrived in life, so I don't need to stretch myself. But that's an individual choice, so it's not a universally applicable principle in any case. However, I think from my experience, I've learned that we need to be open to those opportunities when they come. You don't probably need to go and seek them out all the time. Yes, there are lots of people I come across, and all of us come across, who will come and ask you that I want a role change, I want to do something else, can I do something larger, can I do something, and like everybody wants to be a part of digital now. So everybody wants to try out new things, but when the time comes, when the opportunity really knocks on your door, people find it difficult to make that choice. I think that is the decision point, and in my experience, I've seen that those very innocuous seeming decision points in life, when you can choose a path A or a path B or a path C, and you choose a path B out of path A, B, and C, takes you in a different direction versus if you had chosen path A. But that's something which is 20/20 hindsight vision. But I think when those moments come, a wealth it does require all of us to apply our mind and actually take a calibrated, well thought decision. So one of the things I have done over the years is to write down the pros and cons of everything. Even when, let's say, I wasn't happy with what I was doing, I would just write down pros and cons and give them a score and then arrive at a weighted score. I don't know if it helps or not, but at least I get clarity in my mind that yes, the score is telling you that you need to continue doing what you're doing, or you need to change from what you want to do.
So, for example, Steve Jobs used to famously say, you can only connect the dots looking forward, not looking backward. So sometimes, like you said, I mean, if you look at his own career, most of the dots probably, Nitin, you did not know how it moved forward, like moving to across different functions to the role what you are now, as, even HDFC, for example, so if I ask you first, okay, before I come to that question, the HDFC part, digital banking, when you're given that role, you're very young as a division, digital banking was not that prominent then. So how do you look at that experience?
So from cards, I was also handling the outbound contact center that time. I was moved to branch banking. And I really wanted to experience branch banking also, even though it's very traditional. But I always used to think that I now need to move out of the sales roles and get into more banker roles, so that you get completed as a banker also. And even today, I recommend to a lot of people that you must experience branch banking or any form of operations in banking. So when I got that chance, I moved to Delhi. Used to handle a fairly large region, which was North 1 and East, all the way up to Northeast. That gave a very different exposure altogether. I had learnings from cards, which was on the analytics side, portfolio management, different ways of actually running sales there, including the contact center. So I started to use some of those learnings in my branch banking role as well. But at the same time, I think the one book that I give credit to in shaping my thinking was a book by Sam Pitroda called The March of Mobile Money, which came out, I think, it's not a very well-known book, but one of my colleagues gave me that book to read. And I used to read, so people would generally come across and hand me over some book or the other. So when I read that book, those were the days of MMID. And M-Pesa was obviously very popular in Kenya and all those markets. But it just opened my mind. I don't even remember too much out of that book, but it just kind of conditioned my mind to say that yes, now things are moving on the side where digital was not being used very much, but it seemed like that things are moving to the mobile, and transactions will start happening electronically on the phone, etc. And branch banking roles, beyond a point, when you've been in the same region, they can also become fairly predictable. So I used to spend a lot of time in Mumbai just to be a part of several projects, like the CRM project was going on, several other projects were going on. I was also the project lead for another project that those days called Next Generation Customer Experience, which the bank was running. And that gave me exposure to all other parts of the retail bank also. And because I'd done sales and branch banking by that time, it seemed like that I should move into something which is more technology, uses more of technology. So when I got a call from Mr. Puri, and that's probably mentioned in that book also that Tamal has written, that I was actually in Mathura on 1st of January 2013 when I got that call. Just came out of that Krishna Janmabhoomi temple, and I saw those missed calls from him. And when I returned, he said, I'm creating this role. Would you like to come to Mumbai for that? And of course, I accepted and I went there. It seemed like a good, auspicious thing also to me that day. But yes, I found myself again going back to Bombay in that role. And those days, I don't think any bank had a head of digital sort of a role. And we were also, I think, we were sure about what we wanted to do. Mr. Puri was very sure, but we had to build and evolve the role. And that was my understanding also, that we will evolve the role as it goes along.
So I think when you joined, if you can just look in the numbers, I think it was about 2013, 2% or 1% to what it was when you left?
No. It was about 44%.
44%.
44% transactions used to go through internet and mobile banking. And by the time I left in 2019, that same year March, we had reached 92. And after that, I think the bank is now at about 96.
Fantastic. So, what are the learnings from that phase? If I can, from a overall point of view, what are some of the things you did? Some of the best practices that you'd like to recommend?
See, those days, because we had very little available with us, so we had to first work on helping customers adopt whatever we had and make them use, which also needed us to involve all our employees and our colleagues. So socializing digital was a big agenda for us, and we kind of involved the entire bank, and Mr. Puri himself, along with a lot of us, would travel across the country and do town halls and just tell people that this is what we're trying to do and take feedback from all the employees. And then, keep building on that basis, keep adding more capability, capacity. We started an innovation practice, got people from outside. And then, of course, the application side was equally important. So it really needed that everybody was a part of that whole thing. So we always kind of functioned like a horizontal, just to be sure that everybody is a part of the journey, and it doesn't look like as if it's one single vertical trying to do its own things and the rest of the bank is on its, the old ways.
All of them were like ambassadors for your bank.
Every single person, every single employee.
Okay. So I think I have a few questions before I'll open up this conversation to the audience also. From a point of view, some of the important points what you said when we were conversing. From an observation point of view, you said there are some life skills that I think every individual needs to have. So, for example, you mentioned about sales. What are the skills you learn? From an observation point of view, like he mentioned during our conversation, that is normally very silent. He observes and he tries to imbibe whatever he can, like a sponge. So, can you share some details on that aspect also?
I don't know how to explain that, but yeah, I like observing, and I don't know whether it's a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. Everybody is an individual. Individualistic skills are very different, but I think I can't even say that that's a strength area for me or not. But by observing people, I've realized that you stop being judgmental. You stop being, you stop having any preconceived notions about how things are based on your own experiences. So those biases become a lot lesser, which are based on your own life experiences. And I'm sure all the people sitting here in the digital context must have experiences, because whenever we want to try out a new thing, immediately our own biases play out. That this is how I do it, this is how I see it. When I use this, then this happens. When I do it, when that happens. I think it just kind of conditioned me to keep my own biases aside and focus objectively. I think it brings about objectivity more than anything else.
So I think we have had a lot of different insights. It's difficult to put, a life of a person or the inspirations of life from a person like him into 20 minutes or so. I know I have exceeded my time. I'll just take 2 or 3 minutes for the audience, and we can, yeah. So if anybody has any questions for Mr. Chugh, if there is anything, yeah. I'll keep it to around 2 or 3 and keep your questions very short for the benefit of everybody. And introduce yourself, please.
Nitin, my name is Amit. I'm from skate.ai. So Nitin, the question is, you have been working in HDFC Bank for a really long time. And now, of course, you are in SBI, which is a much larger bank. And, it is for many places where there is no RBI, SBI act as a default bank. So in terms of change in culture and change in size, what are the learnings in the new setup?
I'm just 2 months old in SBI, so I can't even sit in judgment to say that how is it different. But the business is the same, customers are the same, technology is the same, right? Regulations are the same. So how different can it be? The only thing different can be that yes, what you call culture, but culture is also is continuously evolving. So I'm not even trying to observe that or trying to even find any differences there. I think it's best for all of us to just focus on the task and not worry about whether this place is better or that place was different or we used to do it this way and we used to do it that way. It really doesn't matter, honestly. And each organization has its own uniqueness to that extent. So and when you are joining an organization from outside, you have to find a place for yourself rather than thinking that the organization will start adapting to you. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, any other question?
Not sure if I'm visible from here. But yeah, Sushma here from Mahindra Finance. I have one question, very basic question. So usually these days, these certifications, trainings and everything is very much important. Nobody's ready to give you something like, a new opportunity or something unless you kind of have some potential on a written note or something like that, either by an experience or you have some sort of certification or something like that. So during your time, because you did a lot of hops like this, right? Sales and then branch and then digital and all that, right? So did you depend upon people that you already knew that kind of hold my hand and then let me go around it? Or did you go with some sort of, again, some predefined trainings and all that? Like, what was your approach, or was it just something mixed that you did?
I think it's both. In the early part of all of our careers, we have to go through some bit of that rigor of classroom training, on-job training, etc., which is more structured. But as you grow senior, you won't find too many programs to train senior people. They can train you for leadership skills, but who's going to teach you domain skills? So those things you have to learn, and I think the best people to learn from are your own teammates, people who've been doing that for a longer time, but you suddenly come there as their supervisor, but you can't supervise a bunch of people unless you know the domain, so they teach you the best. So, and I think most of my learning, other than from my seniors or training programs, I would attribute a lot of that to my own teams, and that we have to be open to. But yeah, I get your point that today you need certificates and certifications and all of that, because it's becoming noisier than before. And because so many of these options are available today and marketed very well, so it does appear that you do need some of those badges to also flaunt, to say that I'm a certified digital marketer, I'm a certified project manager, I'm a certified this. But when you actually put that to practice, the organizational dynamics may or may not allow all of your learnings to exactly get used the theoretical way that they've been learned. So on-job learning really is learning from everybody available to you, including perhaps the support staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, Chaitanya from Scotiabank. So great to hear your journey and hops, and it's like growth growing up. But were there any moments where things were dull or things didn't work out, and then at that moment, how you came out of it?
Life is not only one direction, unidirectional. So those things happen, and you have to find what keeps you strong. It's very individualistic, and like I was saying that I do this weighted score thing. So once in a while, in a moment of confusion or uncertainty or a low moment, I would do that just to reassure myself that no, everything is fine. Maybe 2 things are not working out the way you want, but there are 10 other things which are working out. So that gives you the confidence that yes, you are not in the wrong place. It might just be a wrong set of circumstances temporarily. But I think it's very individualistic. Like I find a lot of strength from my own, whether you call it spirituality or otherwise, or you might find strength from your family. I find a lot of strength from my family, my friends. So anything that keeps you there works. So I don't think that anybody should try and copy paste that sort of a model.
I think I'm running out of time, really. I think this room can go on and on with the questions, but I think it's been wonderful, talking to you and sharing your life journey and your valuable lessons with all of us. So, on behalf of the entire team here, we would like to say a heartfelt thanks to you.
Thank you. Thank you for getting me.